The unexpected outcome of Alexander's conquests in Gaza and Egypt. Legacy beyond the sword. When we think of Alexander the Great, we picture a conqueror on horseback, charging through Persia, razing cities, and forging one of the greatest empires in history. But tucked between his more famous campaigns, such as those against Darius III and his foray into India, lie two pivotal and often underappreciated chapters: his conquests of Gaza and Egypt. These were not just military victories, they were cultural, spiritual, and geopolitical inflection points that reshaped the ancient world in ways even Alexander could never have foreseen. This is the story of how the winds of change blew from the Mediterranean coast to the banks of the Nile. A story of resistance, rebirth, and the birth of a city that would outlive empires. The Siege of Gaza, a battle beyond brutality. In 332 BCE, as Alexander marched triumphantly through Phoenicia after his legendary victory at Tyre, his path to Egypt was blocked by a formidable stronghold, Gaza. Gaza wasn't just another stop on his journey, it was a bastion of Persian resistance led by a fiercely defiant governor named Battis, a eunuch loyal to Darius III. Perched on a strategic hill and surrounded by massive walls, Gaza stood as the final barrier between Alexander and Egypt. It was a city that knew the cost of surrender and the price of defiance. Alexander, never one to tolerate resistance, laid siege to Gaza with characteristic fury. The siege took 2 brutal months, longer than anticipated. Alexander personally led charges and was even wounded by a projectile that pierced his shoulder. Eventually, siege engines breached the walls and the city fell. What followed was gruesome vengeance. The entire male population was slaughtered or sold into slavery. Battis was dragged alive behind a chariot, a symbolic gesture imitating Achilles' treatment of Hector, perhaps reflecting Alexander's desire to emulate Homeric heroism, but more likely to instill terror. But here's the twist. Gaza's fall was not merely a victory, it marked a turning point in Alexander's mindset. No longer was he just the Macedonian warrior king. In his eyes, and in the eyes of those around him, he was transforming into something else, a divine ruler touched by destiny, above the petty squabbles of men. This transition would become even more pronounced in Egypt. Egypt, a conqueror crowned a god. Unlike Gaza, Egypt welcomed Alexander. Why? The Egyptians had long chafed under Persian rule. Since the Achaemenid conquest, they had seen their temples desecrated, their customs disrespected, and their gods insulted. When Alexander entered Egypt, he was not a foreign invader, he was a liberator. The people laid palm branches at his feet, the priests opened their temples, there was no resistance. Here began one of the most unexpected outcomes of his campaign, Alexander's transformation into Pharaoh, a living god. Coronation at Memphis. In Memphis, the religious capital of Egypt, Alexander was formally crowned Pharaoh. He participated in rituals honoring the Egyptian gods, declaring allegiance to deities like Amun-Ra. Unlike the Persians, he respected local traditions, blending Greek and Egyptian customs in a deliberate strategy of unity through diversity. But it wasn't just politics, it was personal. Alexander began to believe in his own divinity. This belief would find its ultimate expression in one of the most mysterious and profound episodes of his life. The journey to the Oracle of Siwa, Destiny in the Desert. From Memphis, Alexander made an astonishing and dangerous decision to journey deep into the western desert to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, a sacred site so remote that even many Egyptians had never been. Why did he go? To seek legitimacy as a son of Zeus Amun, the chief deity of Egypt, to prove he was more than a mortal. Perhaps to confront the questions haunting every man of destiny. Who am I? What is my fate? Braving sandstorms and dehydration, his caravan nearly perished in the desert, but at last they reached Siwa. What transpired at the temple remains a mystery. The oracle's words were kept secret, but sources suggest he confirmed Alexander's divine parentage. Whether real or fabricated, this moment solidified a turning point. Alexander the king became Alexander the god. This fusion of Greek and Egyptian religious identities would have seismic consequences for centuries to come. The birth of Alexandria, a city that changed the world. After his divine affirmation, Alexander returned to the Mediterranean and made a decision that would outlive every battle he ever fought. he would found a city, a new capital. In 331 BCE, on a wind-swept strip of coast between the sea and Lake Mareotis, he laid the foundations for Alexandria. He chose the site himself, allegedly guided by a dream and divine inspiration. Greek architects sketched the city plan using flour as chalk. This was no ordinary city. Why Alexandria mattered? Strategic location. It would become the Mediterranean's busiest port, connecting Europe, Africa, and Asia. Cultural fusion. A melting pot of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Jewish, and later Roman influences. Center of knowledge. Home to the great library of Alexandria, which aimed to collect all the world's knowledge. Scientific legacy. The city produced intellectual giants like Euclid, Ptolemy, and Hypatia. It was the birthplace of algebra, anatomy, astronomy, and philosophy. Ironically, Alexander never lived to see his city completed, but it would become his greatest legacy, a beacon of civilization long after his empire crumbled. Unexpected outcomes and hidden legacies. So what were the truly unexpected outcomes of Alexander's conquests in Gaza and Egypt? From warrior to divine monarch, Gaza marked the end of the old Alexander, brutal, calculating, Homeric. Egypt birthed the new Alexander, deified, philosophical, and obsessed with legacy. Religious syncretism. His acceptance by Egyptian priests led to a fusion of Greek and Egyptian theology, giving rise to hybrid gods like Serapis, worshipped across the Hellenistic world. This blending would influence future religious philosophies, including early Christianity, the foundation of a cultural superpower. Alexandria became the intellectual capital of the ancient world, where East met West in thought and science. Its legacy would inspire the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and beyond. The seed of the Ptolemaic dynasty. After Alexander's death, Egypt fell to Ptolemy, one of his generals, who established a dynasty that would last nearly 300 years. It culminated with Cleopatra's VII, whose fate intertwined with Rome, sealing the transition from Hellenistic Egypt to Roman Egypt. Legacy beyond conquest. Alexander's sword won battles, but it was his encounters with culture, belief, and identity in Gaza and Egypt that left the deepest marks on history. Gaza reminded the world of the harsh cost of defiance, but it also marked the final victory of his old self. Egypt welcomed a king and gave birth to a god. From the blood-soaked walls of Gaza to the sunlit temples of Amun, from destruction to enlightenment, Alexander's journey reshaped not only a region, but the very idea of kingship, divinity, and civilization. In many ways, it wasn't the conquests themselves, but what came after. A god-emperor crowned in Memphis, a city rising from sand and sea, and an empire of knowledge that truly earned Alexander the title Great. He came, he saw, he conquered, but in Egypt he became immortal. Let us not forget the real stories behind the myths. Sometimes, the most profound victories aren't won with the sword, but with the pen, the temple, and the city that outlasts time. Further reading and exploration. Alexander the Great by Robin Lane Fox. The Greeks in Egypt by P.M. Fraser. The Oracle of Siwa and the Divinization of Alexander Journal of Ancient History. National Geographic's Secrets of Alexandria documentary. Explore the ancient Alexandria through 3D reconstructions, virtual museum tours, and interactive timelines of Hellenistic Egypt. The past is waiting.